Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. Chapter 16. She couldn't tell what Fisk's secretary was doing in there. There was a lot of scraping and some thumping, and what sounded like growling. MJ was glad she turned down that cup of coffee, yet she also regretted it. It would have helped to settle her nerves, but she didn't need caffeine jitters when she was interviewing Fisk. Her phone buzzed, and she considered ignoring it. Her instincts told her not to be on the phone when the secretary came out for her. But then she reconsidered. It would make her look like a busy reporter, and could only help to give the impression of someone who needed to be in touch with others at all times. Besides, it was Peter. She hated how she left things with him last night. There are some things we really need to talk about. Not a good note on which to end a conversation. It wasn't her fault, of course, and Peter could take it. But even so, it was something important, and something he wouldn't want to hear. But if they were going to survive together, they needed to have this conversation. Until that happened, she didn't want him to worry too much. So she hit accept. "Hi," she said when she answered. "I can't talk long. I'm about to go into an interview."
"You report, girl,"
he said. So this was just a chatty check-in, not an "I have to go to an Iceland to fight a robot assassins" conversation.
"Who are you interviewing?"
"You promise not to freak out?"
"Of course."
"Wilson Fisk." A brief silence.
"I'm freaking out."
"Peter," MJ groaned.
"Reporters who try to expose him vanish.
He said.
You know that?"
"I'm just doing an interview. Getting to know him."
"So you can expose him later," he snapped.
"Don't tell me I'm wrong." His tone irritated the hell out of her. "And don't tell me how to do the right thing," she said. "I don't tell you."
"You tell me plenty," he countered.
"No, I offer you advice, and you're welcome to do that in return. But that's not what this is. You're setting limits."
"I'm not setting limits," he said. "I'm trying to keep you safe."
The door to Fisk's office opened. "I've got to go,"
"Wait!
Peter said.
If you get a chance, ask him where he keeps the evidence of his crime."
MJ disconnected, slipped the phone into her purse, and stood up. "Mr. Fisk will see you now," the secretary said. He was big. Everyone knew Wilson Fisk was a large man, but nothing MJ had read. None of the news clips she'd seen on television. None of Peter's story about trying to dodge his massive fists prepared her for the real thing. It was like she was standing next to a creature out of folklore, or from another world. He was tall, yes, but broad and built, on a more massive scale than anyone she'd ever seen. When they shook hands, she had a memory of her father playing with her when she was a little girl, pretending to shake a troll's hand. The difference in proportion wasn't simply notable, it was absurd. For all that, he had a kind of charm that surprised her. He dressed well in suits that were, of course, bespoke, and his manner was relaxed. He projected a kind of aura that suggested there was nothing he would rather be doing than this interview with literally the Daily Bugle's most junior reporter. MJ had no illusions that he'd research her employment history. He would know what she'd written, and when she'd been hired. She and Peter had been careful to make sure there was no public record of the two of them being involved. Peter had been closely associated with Spider-Man when working as a freelance photographer. But it wouldn't surprise her if Fisk knew about their relationship too. If he hadn't bothered to dig deeper yet, she thought, he would later, before she was done with him. But not today. Today was going to be pleasant. Today would be about paving the way. "So tell me about your story," Fisk said. "How can I help you?" MJ had prepared what she wanted to say, and let it come out with the air of spontaneity. She was new at the Bugle, she said. He would know this already, and the fact that she wasn't trying to conceal it might encourage him to let down his guard. And writing stories about working people who stood to benefit from what Fisk was promising in his new apartment projects. "Not just promises," he told her. "Mixed income projects like these have been tried before, but they always fail because of the greed of everyone involved." If you can give 10 units to the working poor, they suppose, then why not 5 and pocket the extra money? If there's profit to be had, why not more? During my time of exile, I realized I was as guilty as anyone of this sort of avarice. No amount of wealth would ever be enough, I thought. So I never stopped thinking of ways to make more money. But that change? MJ prompted. Because of the trial? The trial. My time in Japan, where I dedicated myself to meditation and reflection. I'm not quite ready to give up my material wealth, of course. But now, I strive for balance. I want to make money, but I'm willing to find an amount that's enough. I don't need 5 yachts or 50 sport cars. No one does. Admittedly, I'm enough of an egotist to seek a certain kind of grandeur. So rather than indulging my worst impulses, I'm channeling them into something more productive. Rather than simply growing richer, I want to be a force that helps the city grow its own riches. And you want to be celebrated for that. He smiled. I am by nature an ambitious man, and because I cannot change my nature, I can change the manner in which I express that ambition. Already, other developers are modifying their practices to make them more like mine. Building affordable units for working people, offering higher wages for workers, better benefits. That's all happening because I have changed the standard. Other people are stepping up their game. Without my example, I doubt we see anything like Martin Lee's Feast operation. Doesn't Feast predate your return to New York? MJ asked. Maybe it was a mistake to contradict him, but if she didn't push back a little, he'd either think she was a worthless sycophant or suspect she was after a bigger story. It may have existed, he said, but if you check the timeline, you'll find that he significantly increased his funding and the scope of his operation after I began my program and launched the Fisk Foundation. MJ wasn't sure this was true, but she wrote it down. She'd do the research later and decide how to handle the claim. This is how change occurs, Fisk continued. This is what people who are fortunate enough can do for the city. In the end, history will judge businessmen like me much more kindly than, say, the costume vigilantes. Even if some of them try to do the right thing, they end up sowing chaos more often than they help anyone. MJ wrote this down, all the while keeping her expression neutral. You disagree with me? Fisk said. I can see it on your face. She flashed him her most disarming smile. We're here for me to listen to your opinions, Mr. Fisk. But I want to hear yours as well. He moved his massive hands back and forth between them. If there is going to be any kind of relationship between us, and a relationship is necessary if you are to be a successful journalist, I must know something of you. So tell me what you think of Spider-Man and the others of his ilk. She nodded. It's well known that you have particular reason to dislike costume crime fighters, but I'm not convinced we can live without them. There are bad people with incredible powers and abilities as well, and we need someone who can push back against them. Perhaps, he said, but I believe they seek each other out. The so-called good ones fight the so-called bad ones. It's a public gladiatorial spectacle. They have their fun, and the rest of us clean up their mess. My belief is that if we stop encouraging them, they will go away. I'll remember that next time Electro takes down the power grid, MJ thought. But she said nothing. My fundamental concern is that the way the city is run can't be arranged for those with special abilities, or any persons who are identified as extraordinary, he pressed. The city must be a place where ordinary people can live. Do you consider yourself extraordinary? He laughed. A bass rumble that MJ felt in her bones. I suppose I set myself up for that question. In some ways, yes. I made my fortune, which was nearly ripped away from me by an overzealous and misused justice system. I managed not only to move past that difficulty, but to grow. I have become a better person through adversity. Suddenly, MJ felt as if she was the one who had been set up. That answer felt polished. As she considered this, he looked at the clock of his computer monitor. I'm afraid that's all the time I have for you, Miss Watson, Fisk said. However, I appreciate your coverage of this subject. My pleasure. MJ stood up. He did as well, and once again engulfed her hand in his. I like you, he told her. You don't hesitate to ask the questions or express your opinions, but you don't seem to be looking for kill shots. Far too many reporters walk through that door seeking to trip me up, to set a trap that, in their minds, will end up with me admitting I'm some kind of criminal mastermind. Oh, don't get me wrong, MJ said. I'm very ambitious. I don't doubt it, he said. But there are many paths that lead to the top. Crossing Wilson Fisk isn't one of them. You show a great deal more wisdom. Thank you, she said with her best smile. As she stepped out of the office, she felt like she needed to take a shower. But MJ also felt quite pleased with herself. She rolled the dice and was pretty sure the gamble had paid off. Wilson Fisk would seek to manipulate her to his advantage, but she was going to be one step ahead of him. She'd be the one manipulating Fisk.